I'm speaking to Hanson in Australia. And welcome, Hanson.
Hi there.
We're going to ask him some questions about his experience having a child. And
Okay.
how long were you together before your child was born? And then how old is the child? And I know you've separated. How old when you separated? And give us some background.
Okay. In terms of knowing Jude before uh, we had a child, it was actually quite a interesting experience to say the least. She was hitting her mid-40s, and she wanted to have a child before her biological clock um, told her that she couldn't. So she found me with the purpose of having a child, and she wasn't even ready to be. Well, she was ready to be in a relationship, but her main purpose was having a child with me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to take some time to get to know her. So I think how many years? Tell me if I'm talking too much around the circumstances of our meeting. So, in terms of how many years before Sam was born, it would have been about 2.5, 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And we were together with Sam for an extra three and a half years after that. So 6 years altogether, or so, 6 to 7.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we would have separated about 2 years ago when Sam was about 3.5. And the quality of the relationship, yeah, okay. Tell me if I'm not answering the questions. I'm just answering around it.
No, that's good. It's
The
good.
quality of the relationship before was highly stressful in terms of, am I going to be with this woman or not? Should I have her child or not? And we went to counselling sessions. I was attracted to her because of her. She did a lot of personal work on herself, and I liked that. She was conscious to an extent. She had a commitment to her own personal development, and she wanted to work in the field. She studied a degree so she can do that while she was with me. And I thought, oh yeah, she got into reevaluation counselling. So she ticked a few boxes. But I think even in the early days, on the positive end, it was very sweet. It was very sweet times together. And at the same time, there were the beginnings which thickened and got reinforced after the birth of Sam. There was a level of tension that came from my shortcomings and her expectations
Mm.
that started to unravel. I noticed that even at the birth of Sam, at the hospital, I resisted I wanted to leave her in hospital for a few more days. She wanted to come back, and I just wanted to have a rest. She wanted to get out of hospital, and I noticed that I wasn't that forthcoming in doing everything she said. And I guess because at the time of the birth, I felt she became quite demanding, and I just got tired. And
Can I pause you for a minute? I'm losing your
yeah,
mouth. Can you adjust the camera down a little bit? So,
all right, sorry, yeah,
yeah. Oh, good.
there
Yeah.
you go.
Or adjust your head up. All right. Let's resume with after the birth.
Yeah, after the birth, I think that's when it started, when she became quite demanding of me, and I just started to withdraw. Um, and I just became a person who had to do things for her. There was hardly much experience of being a couple,
A
and I didn't mind
houseboy.
that. I wanted to do stuff for her, and I wanted to do stuff for Sam. And we became a couple. We didn't make love that often, and I knew then that, when I say knew, I was trying out an idea that love is a choice. That in order to love someone, I need to choose to love her rather than falling into love and it happening accidentally.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a real strong commitment from me to really love this woman. And I remember having those fleeting moments of love for her, but then having them dashed quickly by the next criticism or expectation or demand. So all these little things could have been resolved by more. We went to relationship counselling, and I think with most couples we went to relationship counselling when it got really bad. So it was hard work for the counsellor. I remember on one of the first sessions, on one of the counselling sessions with one of the therapists, we had a few, actually one or two, three. I cried in the first session, and the tears came from an acknowledgement that this man, this counsellor, understood me and understood my isolation.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that Jude cried too, and possibly because of the same reasons of being isolated and being in struggle. And for me, at that moment, I felt ready to leave her. Now, in terms of being abandoned, and how I was abandoned with my mother and the whole concept of postpartum thing. From a very early age, I've been pretty much abandoned from both my parents. Both my parents were working migrants. They were first generation. They really wanted to make a good financial impression to themselves living in Australia. So they were often working. And I remember the only time in my childhood that was where we had a family time together was during the day. My father had a restaurant, and on a Tuesday day it was a slow restaurant day, so the restaurant wasn't open. So we drove to the snowy mountains from Sydney. It was a day trip, and when we got back at 4 or 5, my father prepared and my mother prepared themselves back to work to do the dinner shift. So there was an element of I had an avoidant, insecure attachment with both my parents. So there was a real element of being independent, but underneath all that being quite fragile and needy, or needful. So I came to Jude as a fragile, needful young boy in a man's body. So there was an element when she turned her attention onto Sam that I became that independent, I don't need avoidant man, avoidant boy, trying to keep it all together and do as I did when I was the cooperative, highly industrious Chinese student. So there was an element of that happening. At the same time, when Jude became demanding and critical, it was very easy to see her as my demanding and critical Asian mother, where I had to do well at school and consequently being withdrawn and isolated, doing it all on my own. So I guess that fits postpartum abandonment.
Yeah, well, it begins with your childhood, and then it manifests in how you feel abandoned with your partner and abandoned emotionally or physically the relationship. So
Yeah, yeah,
it all fits together, yeah.
yeah, neatly.
And so, what have you done to heal this? Because I know you've done a lot of work. Can you
Well,
briefly
yeah.
describe what you've moved through and where you see it now?
Well, there've been a lot of therapeutic moments and milestones, and they're very tender, and I still feel soft in myself when I recall them. I guess it's a very deep wound. I guess
Mm,
it's
yeah.
like. I think the first time was learning how to cry. That was a therapeutic milestone. That was in my early 20s, and I was in the STOT group. So it was in the early days, in being avoidant and independent and being stoic. I learned not to cry and to knuckle down and do the work, which in some ways I luckily didn't get into a high-performing course. I got into psychology instead, which was very good. It got me to look at myself a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a therapeutic milestone, learning to attach to my feelings and to my gentle side. It's a big moment then, and I think I was about 21. The second time is to make do with my dad. That came about 10 years later when I killed him. Actually, I was doing a psychodrama session where I played my father, and my father wanted to kill me, and I got in touch with his homicidal tendencies towards me and killed me off. And consequently, in that moment, I felt paradoxically very close to him and very intimate towards him.
Mm.
That I became totally understanding and forgiving of my father, and very close. It was like I was living out his wound as well, of him being abandoned by both his parents. And I believe that most Asian kids, there's an element of being abandoned by their parents by how much they push their kids. I needed to bridge that with my father. So there was a lot of father-son work for me that helped me heal, helped me become soft as a man. So that was a very strong therapeutic moment, a milestone.
Specifically, after Sam was born, and you had things re-triggered, presumably.
Yep.
What's your awareness, and how did you deal with postpartum abandonment?
Well, I've been doing a lot of peer counselling, a lot of work, and so the awareness of how I became independent and stoic through all my kind of reflective practices, that was that I needed to be aware of the wound.
Mm-hmm.
So that was it. And in terms of healing, I mean, everything I do is towards the healing, or for want of a better word, towards wellness rather than healing or growth. The trigger moment was, and this is where I'm still processing, I guess. I'm still traveling
It's 5:15.
And that's towards getting close to my mother and getting and forgiving and getting close to Jude. It's actually very timely of this interview because I'm aware that I'm still carrying elements of my hurt and therefore lack of forgiveness and my anger towards Jude and my mother. But I felt towards my ex-partner now. And it's healing is to celebrate and acknowledge my vulnerability and softness and my need for attachment and connectedness to a woman. This is a real man-woman kind of a feeling of feeling my own grief and celebrating my own grief, and in that turn acknowledging the shortcomings of my women, of Jude, of my mother, and so forth, and of other women.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually this healing this wound of not being connected to my mother brings me closer to all women everywhere. It's and I'm still discovering that. There's still elements of my being where a need for connection to a woman is slighted in some way, however so subtly, and feeling my bodily response of some level of disappointment and feeling, so first acknowledging that vulnerability and acknowledging, yeah, that's still that childhood need there, and at the same time feeling that in the same way I forgave my father and him wanting to kill me off, feeling that wound and feeling the softness and vulnerability of that other person. And I think reviewing my relationships with more recent women, just seeing how they've been hurt themselves just brings me closer to them and more forgiving and loving. It's been quite a journey, actually.
Wow.
And I think the healing element for me is to feel more my adulthood rather than my boyhood in this, and consequently take on more leadership. You mentioned the king within yourself. For me, it's feeling the childhood wound and being an adult in response to it. It's interesting in this time of my life now, I'm taking on more roles in leadership and training, and becoming more of the soft and merciful king, in a sense. There's an element of just infinite forgiveness, actually, which is quite a realization as I'm talking.
Yeah.
Which I never got from any of my parents or people in leadership positions, a level of understanding and forgiveness. And what this journey has given me is that I'm feeling a bit teary as I'm talking to. There's a real sense of gratitude where I can get this level of forgiveness.
Oh, yes.
With women and with men, which I haven't felt before.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well said. Touched me too.
There's recently there's a conference up in Brisbane. I was hearing a guy talk about his stages of grief in losing his teenage son. He was a hostage negotiator, psychologist, and he outlined 10 stages of grief.
Wow.
As opposed to the Kubler-Ross 5. And the last stage is gratitude. Which makes a lot of sense to me, obviously.
Yeah.
So, in this healing, and I think all stages of healing resolves in a state of gratitude. So, I'm entirely grateful at this moment, which I can't forget, of being abandoned by my mother and by all my partners and my current girlfriends, to get me closer to my vulnerability in that area and feeling theirs and feeling their defences and being challenged and needing to be patient,
Mm-hmm.
and also acknowledging that some women may never get close to me, never, and still having gratitude around that. That's something else that I'm working on processing, being patient on. So life is rich.
Yeah, well, that's a great way to end our interview, and I'm touched. Thank you so much for sharing so much of yourself, and I hope this will be an inspiration to young men and women who have yet to experience the massive coming of age, rite of passage that parenthood brings. Thanks, Hanson.
Yeah, yeah. It's God. It's a real journey when the focus is turned inwards with me on this one. So easy to blame, so easy to put the anger outwards. Oh,
Yeah.
oh! I need a good session after this, Jack.
Okay.
I think I haven't had this session actually.
So for our viewers, Hans is referring to co-counseling sessions, which we have done a number of as partners. So thanks again. I will end the recording now and